the entire school college system. When do you think was invented? 60s, mid-60s? No, slightly earlier than that. Like 1850, 1860. So this was done by the Prussian army to train people to work in two places, either the military or in factories. Okay, and in both of these places, in factories and in the military, what you need is not independent thinking. What you need is not creativity. What you actually need is indoctrination.
Absolutely.
What you actually need is people following the rules, never breaking them. But in the real world today, we need people who are independent thinkers. We need people who do not need instructions to get the work done, right? But we are teaching the exact opposite in our schools. This entire education system that we are a product of, that both you and I are a product of, this was actually created to train army men and to train factory workers.
How often have you found that something you learned in college doesn't really apply in the real world? Whatever you learned does not really translate to actual tangible benefits for the company or for your startup. That is a problem faced by numerous MBA graduates in our country today. Our guest today is Pratham Mittal. Pratham is the founder of Masters Union, which seeks to get experiential learning into the fold for a lot of young talent today. We speak with Pratham about his experiences from his time at a boarding school to going to the US, to Wharton, and how that translated into building Masters Union. We speak with him about how students at Masters Union learn by doing. We explore a lot of deep concepts about education, edtech, and value creation in general. एक quick sidebar to Analytical Raj from Podcaster Raj. हम देखते हैं कि काफी लोग हमारी videos देखते हैं, but subscribe नहीं करते. So if you do like our work, please like, share, and subscribe. Now, we hope you enjoy this brand new episode of First Unicorn Chats. Pratham, welcome to First Unicorn Chats. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Exciting.
You know, I was really excited to have you here because while EdTech has kind of become big in the last couple of years, especially post-pandemic, you guys have really taken to the root of the problem, right? Which is the way in which we basically end up educating ourselves, right? Experiential learning. So why don't you just begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Masters Union?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give the short version to begin with. So I was very lucky to get into the Doon school. Just, I think you also went to a boarding school, so you know that life. And from there again, got very lucky that I got accepted into the University of Pennsylvania. And there, I think one thing led to another, and I was in a class with Adam Grant.
Oh wow!
Which I'm sure you follow on Twitter or Instagram. He's quite popular now, but he was just a professor back then. And the way he used to teach was incredibly interesting. He would just give you problem statements from the real world in each class. And as a group, you'll work on those problem statements, come up with solutions, and just share the solutions with the class. That's about it. Like no books, no slides, none of that. And one of those problem statements led me to working with a guy called Randy. He was a Lebanese guy. And we ended up taking that project, building a product out of that project. And that product eventually became a company.
What was the product?
It was a content management system for large publishers. So something very niche. One of the problem statements that he gave us was from a local newspaper called the Philadelphia Inquirer. Okay. I don't know if you were. It's one of the oldest newspapers where Benjamin Franklin founded it back in the day, right? And so, the problem statement was that, when we, and this was around the time that, Mitt Romney versus Obama, I think.
Right.
Or,
2008.
2008, 9, 10, that time.
Right.
Midterm elections were coming.
No, it was the second time. So it was 2012, right?
12, correct. Around that time. I forget exactly which election it was. But they wanted to create these polls on their website. And every time they wanted to create a poll, they would have to send entire thing to their developers in India. And then they would code it back. The time that it would take between them sending the details and the developers coding it back, it would take 3 weeks. And the story would already be old. So they just wanted a tool which could easily configure polls, right?
Okay.
And so we built it out for them as a very small sort of, I think it was a 6-page code. I remember still, right? 3 files. And they're like, hey, this is very useful to us. Why don't you build this a little bit further, add log in, log out, some data analytics, all of that. So we did that, then became a product. And then we incorporated a company and we started selling it to other companies other than just Philadelphia Inquirer.
Right.
So one thing.
So you're basically learning by doing, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think my entire Penn experience was hinged on building this product rather than anything else. We did 40 other courses. And I don't think any other course did nearly as much for me as doing this project with my friend.
Right. So by that point in time, and this was how long into your
Second, third year?
second, third year. By then, was it like you were sorted that yaar yahi karna hai ki?
No, not at all. I mean, it was a project, right?
Right. No, entrepreneurship. I mean.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
Okay.
I mean, to an extent, it was because I come from a hardcore Baniya Marwadi family, and I think in our lineage, it's just like taken for granted that you will start up.
Correct.
Right? But I think what's taken for granted actually is not that you would start up, but that you would join your dad's business.
Correct.
Whatever it might be, right? And so I think that was perhaps the foregone conclusion in my head that I would join my dad in whatever it is that he's doing. But this came accidentally to us, this project, right? And me and Randy, we told each other that, hey, listen, if we are able to earn enough to sustain ourselves by the time we graduate, then we continue doing this full time. And if not, then, he'll take a job and I'll come back to India and work with my dad.
Right.
I think that was the understanding. But I think we got lucky. We got a very good contract in our final year from New York Times.
Oh, no.
And they paid for 4 years upfront. We gave them a discount. They said, yeah, of course, we'll pay for the 4 years upfront. And that became our seed money.
Nice.
And the company remained bootstrapped. So I ended up running that company for 10 years after.
And what's happening with it now?
It's still running.
Nice.
I think Randy runs it full time. And I moved back to India. We spent 10 years together. My shares vested over 10 years.
Oh.
And
So I'm just trying to kind of pinpoint the time that you're like, okay, from the time you started, you're like, hey, I have to do something with my family. I have to go into the family business. But can you draw a line where, hey, here the entrepreneurial bug just bit me, right? I'm no good for...
I think it was when the first check came.
Okay.
And it's a longer story and we can get into that. But what happened was Philadelphia Inquirer, when they asked us to, add a few more features to that product, to that project, in fact, they gave us a $20,000 check.
Okay.
They're like, okay, do this, we'll pay you.
Right.
And in the US, nobody expects you to work for free. In India, you would ask kids, when the US, they actually pay you. So we got paid. And I think that's when we realized that, hey, this feels good.
Right.
Interestingly, both Randy and I were not American.
Yeah.
I was Indian and he's Lebanese. And so we couldn't accept that money in our bank accounts. Because we didn't have that tax number or whatever in the US, right? And so we had to actually ask one of our friends to accept the money and pay us later or whatever. I think all of those experiences just brought in a lot of hustle.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to that exact word of hustle, right? And you mentioned that you're from the Doon School. And I'm from Sherwood. So boarding school, a lot of ways in which I realized that it shaped me, right? There are bad sides to it. For example, unfortunately, the food in my school was really bad. So I could have probably been a foot taller, hopefully, if I got good food. But beyond that, right, I went to Sherwood when I was like 7.5, 8 probably, right? And you kind of, first couple of years are tough, it shapes you, right? And then you kind of fight your own battles, right? Now looking back, I'm 31. When I look back at my own life, right, and the decisions I took, I actually feel that a lot of those actually come from my experiences in my childhood, right? I would love to know from your perspective as well, right? Where was it that, those experiences kind of lined up with your entrepreneurial life?
No, great question. Yeah. I think Doon School is all about survival of the fittest, right? It's really hard. It's like wild, wild west, and I'm sure it was the same for you, right? Everything is very competitive. You're playing sports every day. You're participating in various sports. You're participating in, one act play one day and then the music competition the next day and, debating competition. So you really have to do three things. I think one is you have to really time manage because everything is vying for your time. So you have to prioritize. I think that's something you learn. Number two, you learn how to work in ambiguity, right? So you're learning all of these skills for the first time. There is no coach, right? You have to figure things out by yourself. You have to ask for help. You have to sometimes sneak in a laptop because laptops weren't allowed. So just so that you can watch YouTube videos of someone swimming so that you can learn by watching.
Watch YouTube videos in school? I never could, man. I never get devices. Right.
It wasn't easy, but somehow we used to manage, right? I think time management, figuring out things by yourself. So tackling ambiguity. And I think third is just to not have any ego.
Yeah.
Right. I think school crushes your ego because in Doon School, at least, everyone's better than you at everything, right? And you realize your place in the world is absolutely at the bottom, and you have to build yourself from there. So I think in school you get bullied, you get harassed, you get beaten up, And I have some very crazy stories, which I don't know if it's good for camera, but
That's okay. I have same ones, right? We'll get in trouble together.
no, but all of those things really take away any ego that you might have.
Right.
So I think those three things completely transform.
No, absolutely. I think ego does go away because when you're little, right? So what age did you go to boarding?
And in class 7.
In class 7. Or in class 3.
Oh wow,
Right.
Yeah.
So class 3 and 4 was just about adjustment, and there's no parents to teach you. There's like, even in terms of legalities, yeah. So one of the things that I look back, fondly in a certain sense is that now there's a whole conversation around being able to compartmentalize, right? People think that they're good at multitasking. Nobody is good at multitasking, right? But what boarding school actually teaches you is that, look, you're going to only have your prep hours for, let's say, studying for your unit exams, which are going to be in the evening. During the day, after school, you have to go play, you have to do your elocutions, you have to do your dramatics, whatever you want, but you have that limited time, right? So you were forced to kind of be in that space that, look, when I'm studying, right? If you don't, you will flunk.
Yeah.
If you flunk, you can't do the things that you want to
do, yeah.
right? So I think that was something that that worked out for me, right? But yeah, so even from an education standpoint, did you feel that education, there was something missing from the academic side, which you wanted to change later? Or is that something that only in retrospect you were able to figure out that, hey, look, this wasn't done right?
No, yeah, let's talk about college for a second, right? So I think college, as I said, I took 40 courses over 4 years, right? So 5 courses a semester, 40 courses. And I think like very few courses were actually useful to me. See, you go to school to learn how to think, you go to school to learn how to do hard work, you go to school to understand basics of how the world works, right? But once you're in college, I think you should be taught to an extent things that will actually be useful to you in your life. But I think even in a very prestigious Ivy League university like the University of Pennsylvania, I think a lot of courses were completely misaligned. The professor was teaching what he has been teaching for the last 40 years, or she's been teaching for the last 40 years, and not necessarily what the industry needs are, right? Or not necessarily what I might find useful in the future. So I think that was true for probably 39 out of those 40 courses. And this is Penn and Wharton that we're talking.
Yeah.
Right. We were taught through books that were written maybe 5-10 years before that. We were not really taught through like real life projects. The one professor that did teach through real life projects ended up actually helping me build my first business.
Right.
But I think even in the US, and we look up to the US in terms of education, we look up to Ivy Leagues in terms of education, I still think there's a lot lacking.
Yeah. So even while you were saying this, right, I was just trying to remember my first year in the corporate sector, right? And I remember my partner at the time telling me, and this is McKinsey we're talking about, right? It's like, look, first year you're a liability. I was like,
Yeah.
what? I was like, you took me through 12 rounds of interviews, now you're calling me a liability. It's like, it's going to take about a year for us to make you unlearn the bad habits that have been taught to you in college, right? And the first thing that they ended up working with us on was communication, right? Before I touch upon that topic, I'd like to hear from you, right? Because you've seen students and peers outside of India, in the US, and you've seen now Indian students. What's the gap in communication skills like, and why do you think that exists?
So I think communication can be divided into two things, right? One is your language skills, and the other is your
Ability to articulate.
ability to make an argument, right? And both of them are completely mutually exclusive. I think one has nothing to do with the other, right? So when it comes to pure language ability, and let's say we are talking about English, right? Then of course, people who have been born and brought up with English as their first language, they would have an upper hand there. But I think when it comes to articulation, I don't think there's anything separating Indians or Americans or Europeans. I think there's a normal curve in all the countries. It looks exactly the same, right? So I have American friends who are great at grammar, great at language, and also great at articulation. I have American friends who are great at language, but suck at articulation. They can't structure their argument. They can't think or speak in a way that the other person will understand. They're not empathetic at all. They're going in their own direction where the other person is not understanding anything. And the same can be said for my Indian friends, right? So I think language ability, of course, English, America would have an upper hand. But articulation, I think that, and we don't do too badly on that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's a difference between, language skills versus communication skills.
Yeah.
It's like a bit of a
I think we call it the same thing. It's not.
Yeah.
Really.
And the first, when you get into a big consulting firm, even like McKinsey, the first few months, what they teach you is communication, right? There's something called the pyramid principle. Have you heard of it?
No.
So the pyramid principle was by one of the consultants who came up with it, called Barbara Minto, I think, in the 60s. So it basically says that you have to structure your argument in a way that you first get to the point and then you talk about your supporting
Sure, yeah.
right?
We call it the Nestorian order.
Correct. So for example, if I say that, hey, who's your favorite cricketer, right? You say that I like cricketers who make a lot of runs, who are consistent and who can lead the team. So I like Virat Kohli, right? It's a good argument. It's a good communication, this thing, but you just gave me all the things about why you're going to choose your answer, and you chose your answer later. So the pyramid principle says that you answer the question first. It's like, my favorite cricketer is Virat Kohli because he can thrive under pressure, he can play and etc. Right? So I think, and then when you kind of take that into the broader aspect of business, because as a consultant, you are interacting with the top business leaders, right? They don't have time to hear your reasoning. They want to hear the answer first. And then if you have the time, explain your work. Right? So I think that was something that that came across, right? And that was also something that I felt was, to a certain extent, missing in business schools, right? On that note, would love to understand just a little bit deeper in terms of your identifying the problem with current business schools. I know you guys went on in terms of, hey, how much should a student get paid? But would love to understand, how did you kind of isolate this as the problem to solve and for Masters Unit?
For me, I wanted to start with business because business, like undergrad business, BCom, MBA, and MBA is the largest market. It's almost 65% of all students who are in college are studying one of these three programs.
Wow.
Right? Engineering is just 10-15%.
Okay.
Science is another 10-15%, right? The most, like the bulk of students are studying.
India.
This is India. And globally, the number is even higher.
Right. So give or take about what, 4 crore students?
4.5 crores, 4.5 crore students. The number is growing very, very fast.
Yeah.
So 4.5 crore students. This year, almost 1.75 crore new students will enter into higher education, right? And almost 1 crore of them are studying something which resembles maybe a BCom, MBA, right? 1 crore students. So I thought that was the biggest market, number one. Number two, at the undergrad and business level, I didn't see very promising institutions in India. We have very promising institutions when it comes to medicine, when it comes to engineering to an extent. But when it comes to business, not too many, right? Even though it's the largest market, we don't have our equivalent of Wharton in India. We don't have our equivalent of, let's say, Sloan in India or Stern in India. So we thought there's an opportunity to create that on campus. The other thing is that this year, 18 lakh Indians will go abroad, right? And most of them are actually going for a business program.
Right.
I don't know the exact number. We don't have that breakup. But I would venture that more than 10 lakhs are going for a business program, either an MBA or an undergrad. So I think there is huge demand, there's huge capacity, and there's huge need for a good business school in India. So I think that's what led us to building a business school, number one. Number two, in terms of pedagogy, there are these government bodies called UGC, AICT, NAC, NIRF, NABARD, central ministry. The central government has education ministry. The state governments have education ministries. The state governments have their own version of UGC and AICT, right? So there are some 18 different accrediting bodies, right? And the thing is that if you're running a university in India, it's very hard for you to innovate. It's very hard for you to bring the latest curriculum to your students. Incredibly hard, right? You just have to jump so many hoops to get there. So we thought that we'll build a school outside of the regulation. The only thing would be that we can't give a degree. So we said that, hey, listen, let's try and build a business school that doesn't give degrees, but that gives great education and great outcomes, right? And maybe people will not worry too much about a degree. And I think we've reached a stage in India and in our lives where I think the education and the outcome, which is either placement or entrepreneurship, matter way more than some piece of paper.
Right.
And so that's how the Masters Union was designed.
That is such a profound way of looking at the problem, man. And because the thing is that everybody's talking about the demographic dividend that the country is going to have. But people miss the nuance point, which is that if most of your young population coming out of colleges, which is supposed to be well-trained, well-educated, right, is unemployable to a certain extent because their skills don't transfer or apply to the real world, then we are missing it, right?
Let me in fact go even deeper there. Since you mentioned we want to go deep, right?
Yeah.
The way schools and colleges look like today, that there's a building and there's a state as in the government is responsible for educating the country. This entire model, tell me when this was invented.
Sorry, the model of
the government having government schools and government universities, and there'll be actual buildings where students will go in the morning at 7 a.m., come out at 2 p.m. The entire school college system. When do you think was invented?
60s, mid-60s?
No, slightly earlier than that. Like 1850, 1860.
Oh, that way. Okay. I thought after independence.
No. So I'm talking about the world, like global, already in India, right? So this was done by the Prussian army to train people to work in two places, either the military or in factories. Okay, and in both of these places, in factories and in the military, what you need is not independent thinking. What you need is not creativity. What you actually need is indoctrination.
Absolutely.
What you actually need is people following the rules, never breaking them. What you actually need is people taking instructions and never coming up with it. But in the real world today, we need people who are independent thinkers. We need people who do not need instructions to get the work done, right? But we are teaching the exact opposite in our schools. In our schools, if you're given an assignment, sometimes the paper which sort of outlines the assignment is longer than the assignment answer.
Yeah.
Because they give you so many instructions. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this, right? And we are making people essentially following instructions which in later in life they're not going to get. We're not getting independent thinkers. So this entire education system that we are a product of, that both you and I are a product of, this was actually created to train army men and to train factory workers.
Wow.
That's it. It was made for that. Think about it for a second. What does a school resemble the most? Like what other institution does a school resemble the most?
Army?
No, jail. When kids leave school, aren't they running, happy, excited?
More of boarding school, huh?
No, of course, I mean, boarding schools, we can get to that, but it's super interesting.
Yeah.
Jails and our schools have a schedule. You have to wake up at this time, you have to sleep at this time, you have to eat at this time. Eating will only be available for 30 minutes. You have to leave at a certain time, come in at a certain time. When you're in the school, you have to wear the same clothes. All of those schools resemble exactly jails.
So this is going to become a meme, man.
It's true. I mean, it is true. Yeah, it is. And they both have very similar origins.
Yeah.
And before 1860s, we had universities. We had Oxford, Cambridge. They did not look like this.
Their campuses.
There were campuses. I mean, there was freedom there to do whatever you want to do. You can change courses. You don't have to follow a strict curriculum. Year 1, course 2, course 3, course 4. That's not how Oxford, Cambridge, old universities work.
Right.
This happened all after, World War I, World War II.
Oh, very interesting.
I mean, kids take any opportunity to miss school, right? And you're paying for students to go to school. And that makes no sense.
Right.
Shouldn't students be excited? And if they're not excited, how will they learn?
Absolutely. I think it is so bang on, right? Because I was reading somewhere that now there are schools where you don't have exams till like the 10th grade, right? You figure out how the world works, you ask questions on that, and that's how you educate yourself, right? I give you another example. It just came to mind. I had written an article on this long time back. There's an economic model called the incentives model, right? To basically figure out the principal agent problem, how two people react in a situation, right? The long and short of it is that if you are, for example, a shopkeeper and you want your salesman to work on two aspects. One is sales and the other is service. Ki sales badhao aur अच्छे से service karo. The person who is employed of doing that, right? He will always only do the activity, which is the measurable outcome, right? The rest he will free ride on. You can't measure service. So what he's going to do is he's going to maximize on selling. He's not going to care about the customer experience. He's not going to care about repeats. And in the long term, that's going to come and affect you. In education, the way I had looked at it was that what you are actually optimizing for is for the student to actually pass the exam, right? That's the only metric that we've all been kind of following, right? But actually, when you say that you want somebody to be educated, it means that you want him to communicate well. You want him to be a critical thinker. You want him to be 10 other things, right? But because the exam only accounts for, the only measurable metric. So the student, what does he do? He's like, massive exam mein pass hoonga na.
There's a very cool book called The Learning Game.
Okay.
And it talks about, it's Anna Lara Fabrega. She's a teacher called Miss Fab. So she's outlined the fact that schools are a game that students have figured out how to game.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I know, what this teacher likes. I'm going to behave in a way the teacher likes.
Right.
Right. I'm going to write the answer in a way that the person who's going to be checking the exam will like it. I'll write in a good handwriting. I'll underline things. Yeah. Those are all games we are playing. That's not actually education.
Correct.
That's us gaming the exam to get the best marks.
Great.
I think people who do well in school are people who game the system better than the others. Not necessarily people who understand the content better than the others.
Very true. And that's why there was, at least in our school, in ICSE, there was a thing, right? That Hindi paper mein, bas writing achhi karo.
Writing achhi likh
Aapke marks aa jayenge.
Blue or black use kar lo. So that, black words are highlighted. I remember there was this, my teacher had told me that use this word called, I was also ICSE by the way, and that Ekanki Suman and all of that.
Yeah.
Right. So the teacher told us that just use the word King Kartavya Vimud. It's a very complicated Hindi word. He told us just use that word in some, this question comes just, in your essay or something, just write it and underline it 3 times. And the person who's checking will be very impressed by this thing and just use that.
It worked?
Yeah, it worked. I got 99 in Hindi.
Got 99?
Yeah. I was like the state topper. And in English, also I got a 99. This is ICSE. And that's again, I played similar games there.
Honestly, I want to see your writing, man.
My handwriting was amazing. I was underlining everything. I was spending more time. The teacher told us that, hey, listen, always start your answer by leaving 1 inch on the left margin and always finish your answer leaving 2 inches on the right margin.
Right.
Because then the flow of the page looks good.
Correct.
I was literally told that.
Yeah. So basically, I did that. So basically learning how to game the system, right?
I gamed ICSE. I got 96.8%.
Nice.
Right. I'm not proud of it because I'm telling you I gamed it.
And now you're challenging the traditional.
I don't remember like a organic chemistry. I don't remember a little bit of it also.
Right.
Like benzene. I forgot all of it.
Very funny, man. Like I was going through my Hindi paper when doing it, and very nice handwriting, and I was appreciating my own work.
Yeah.
And then I found a spelling mistake.
Yeah.
And for the last 5 minutes of the exam, I was like, "Kaatu ki na kaatu, warna ganda ho jayega." I didn't cut it. Right? But anyway, I think I'm going to pivot from here to what education was like for people like us to what you are making education today for your students, right? Right before we began this conversation, you were telling me about how students are building their own projects in different areas, right? Whether that's companies in different areas. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's very simple. We strongly believe that, when you want to learn how to swim, you cannot do that by taking an exam. You cannot do that by looking at slides. You cannot do that by even looking at someone swimming.
Right.
You actually have to get into the water and swim yourself. Right? You have to drown a couple of times. You have to, have that water sucked into your nose a couple of times. And you have to break a few bones, right? And I think that's also the right way or the only way to learn any skill, and more specifically in business, right? I'll give you a few examples. You went to LSE economics. I'm sure you took a course in accounting.
Yeah.
Right. Probably was a boring course.
Yeah.
Right. Even at Penn, I think like most boring. I mean, the least rated course was always accounting, right? And the thing is that accounting is so important in all of our lives. But that course is designed in such a boring way. So one of our assignments in one of our accounting courses is that students actually have to go and audit the books of a local cafe.
Okay.
And they have not been taught accounting yet. We don't teach them, this is, credit, debit, line, ref line, right line. We don't teach them that. We just say, hey, listen, here are the books of a local cafe. You have to audit them and you have to present the audit in this specific format.
Okay.
Now students will go talk to the guy. They'll understand the business. They'll figure out, what are the mistakes, all of that. And as they're doing that audit, they will Google, they will YouTube, they'll figure out how the balance sheet and how the income and expenses statement actually works, how it should look like. And then they'll come with an audit and would have, figured out some mistakes.
But beforehand, they've not been briefed on what a cash flow statement, balance sheet, nothing.
No, that data is available online.
Okay.
Just give the statement, give a problem statement to the student that excites them. This is exciting, right? I'm writing a local dhabe wala, right? It's exciting. I will figure out by myself how I want to make that guy's life better.
Right.
And I will go learn accounting myself. If I were to teach you accounting and take an exam at the end of it, you only study for the exam. And then the next day after the exam, you'll forget everything. Believe me, even if I were to ask you today, give me, and you might know since you're in finance, but if I were to ask people who have studied finance, tell me, in a balance sheet, what is on the left and what is on the right, most people will not know.
Right.
And if I ask them like, okay, tell me like, what is the structure of the balance sheet? Where is the highest liquidity? Where is the lowest liquidity? I doubt people will know. Right. So here, when you're doing this as a project for someone who's a stakeholder, there are emotions now attached to it. Right? So one girl came to me, and this is, I think, 2 weeks ago. She came to me crying. She's like, I just finished my accounting audit assignment. And thank you so much for, making us with the assignment. I was like, but why are you crying? She's like, what I realized is that my client, who was the dhabe wala, he kept telling us that he doesn't get a loan. He's like, I'm profitable. I'm taking money home. But for expansion for my next dhaba, I'm not getting a loan. And that's my problem statement, right? And figure out like what's wrong with my books. And so she figured out, like her team figured out that he was keeping inventory of 3 months. Okay.
Right.
Because you're keeping 3 months inventory, your balance sheet will look like a complete mess.
Right.
And that is the reason you are making profit.
Because you have days inventory outstanding.
You have like this inventory, and now suddenly inventory is such a misunderstood balance sheet concept. But now she's understood it.
Right.
And she's like, now we've just told him to structure his ordering in such a way that he only has to hold inventory for a week.
Right.
And now suddenly, like, banks are like, okay, giving him because he's fixed that problem in his balance sheet.
Very interesting.
Right? And she's like, I've changed the guy's life, and like, I don't know why I'm crying, but this is very satisfying to me.
Great.
Now she will remember balance sheet better than anybody else who scored 100 on 100 in a balance sheet exam or whatever, an accounting exam.
That's brilliant, yeah. And no, I'm so impressed to actually hear that that students are actually learning from first principles, right? And now the other side of it, one is that, hey, what you learn has to be valuable to companies, right? The other side of it is actually making companies aware that these people exist, right? The current systems, whether that's in India, it's an IIM or an ISB, they have their infrastructure in place in terms of campus hiring, which I feel is a really bad habit that we have in India. Personal experiences notwithstanding. But again, there are infrastructures which are built around it, right? That the companies aayenge aapko, because this particular school has a refined cachet of students, right? How are you looking at solving that problem for Masters Union students?
Oh no, it's very simple. How many companies do you think go to IIM Ahmedabad every year?
30, 40?
Yeah, 60, 68. I think last year was the number. How many companies are there in India?
64 million SMEs, subset of that about 10 million larger enterprises.
I mean, you answered your question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so we say, okay, if there are some companies who are very cagey about visiting campuses. No, we will only go to Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and Calcutta. So we're like, okay, you're more than welcome to come to Masters Union if you want to, and we'd love for you to come. But it's okay if we understand if you don't have the time or if you've already maxed out at IIMs. But guess what? There are some 64 lakh other companies in India who are more than happy to recruit, who all need good talent. So we reach out to the long tail. We reach out to so many other companies who are looking for good talent. I mean, even just startups. I mean, startups pay a lot, right? Startups have great growth trajectories. Startups have great roles for students, especially founders office, all of these roles. Yeah. So, I mean, how many unicorns in India? 100?
Over 100, yeah.
I think not more than 6 go to IIMs to recruit. So we reached out to the other 94. Said, hey, listen, we have these students and they've done these projects. I'm not going to show you their CV. I'm actually going to show you 6 projects or 6 companies that these students have built. And you judge them for the work that they have done and not for their grades. We see, do you want to recruit them or not? So when I go to those 94 others, even if 60 of them recruit, I'm more than happy, right? So, I mean, of course, there are these on-campus structures that IIMs have built and it serves them very well. And I wish I can build something as repeatable as they have. But I'm very happy selling my students. IIMs don't need to sell their students because their brand sells it.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy. I have a 30% placements team, right? In fact, I don't have an admissions team. I have a placements team, right? It's very different from edtech companies. So we just have our students, so basically there are 30 people in my team and there's 200 MBA students. Each of my team members is associated with 6 to 7 students. His job is to make sure that those 6, 7 students get the best career outcome they possibly can.
Nice.
Now for the entire year, that guy or that girl, his job is to make sure that those 7 students get placed. Right now you have this one person who's from the industry, who's an HR expert, who has connections across the industry. His job is just to place 7 students a year.
Wow. Very interesting.
And economics works out.
Yeah. While you were speaking, I was just trying to think about this, and you guys are actually very close. And let me explain this, right? You guys are very close to what a strategy consulting firm does for early talent, right?
Yeah.
Because when I went in post-college, if you ask me why did I go into management consulting, was because I wanted to have like a toolbox, right? And what I'd heard of people was that, look, you want to become early in your career, you want to become a Swiss knife, right? So if you're thrown into a business problem, you can figure out different pieces, how they come together and try to add value to it, right? You guys, through Masters Union, that's just taken to the next level, right? Because usually what you're talking about, the unicorns, were going after the MBB, right? The McKinsey, BCG, Bains of the world, to get talent from there. 3-year, 4-year experienced people, because the learning curve flattens out precisely after 2 years in consulting firms, because you've got that skill set. It seems that you guys are trying to hack that, right? Because it's very real world.
We didn't think of it like that, and it's a great way to put it actually. But I think for us, it was 3 things. Again, One is that can we get our students to hustle? The thing is that, in the very first term, students have to build a dropshipping e-commerce store. Right? So every student who's perhaps never been an entrepreneur before has to become an entrepreneur. You have no option, you have to do it. And I've noticed the change before and after this project when they make the first sale and when they see a profit being made in their Paytm accounts. Something switches on in them.
Right.
Their DNA changes. They become different human beings altogether. Earlier, they were these people who were coming from, some corporate job and looking for a better corporate job. Now, suddenly their DNA changes. They're like, dude, listen, this was the first time I wasn't paid for my time. Till now, I've always been paid for my time.
Right.
An employee, but I just made a profit and it wasn't that hard. So maybe there is something in me that I can become an entrepreneur, right? And I'm not saying you go start a company, but that DNA is very helpful to other companies when they're recruiting, right? So I'll ask you, if you're recruiting, who would you rather recruit? Someone who's entrepreneurial, can figure shit out, who's excited about life, who's going to hustle, versus someone who has a 10 on 10.
Right.
Right. I'm sure it's the...
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's number one. Second is, how do you work in teams? In India, unfortunately, our high school never allows us to work in teams. Everything is sort of individual exams, individual assignments, individual homework, right? The same is true for undergrad. So we have to now train students to actually be able to work in teams, how to not chat over each other, how to not shoot down the other person's idea, how to actually take everybody along, how to let someone else be the leader for once and then let the other person speak and you listen. All of these things you have to teach. I think that's the second thing this entire program does. And the third is, how do you communicate in a way the articulation is understood by the other person?
Wow.
I think that's what we are teaching. We're not teaching finance, accounting, marketing. We're not teaching that.
Right. You know what I really, really like about your approach is that you actually asked me, right, that what kind of a person would you hire? And what you explained right now was an entrepreneurial person versus, let's say, somebody who's a job seeker, right? To my mind, a job seeker is closer to, what he gets as a reward is more like a drug, right? So you get a drug at the end of the month and then you go into the next month. For an entrepreneur, it's not the drug, it's the taste of blood in the mouth.
Yeah.
Right? So when you ask me that question, the question in my mind is, would you want a drug seeker or do you want somebody who wants taste of blood in the mouth?
It's very unstoppable.
Yeah.
If you can do those three things for somebody, that's better than teaching them marketing. You cannot teach somebody marketing, actually.
True.
I don't think you can teach.
True.
They have to have the urge to learn themselves.
Right.
Only then can you teach.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Speaking of marketing, you guys also, in your second module, you go into a creator program, right? So that, efficient distribution channels can be built out. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
No, I think every company is a media company.
Yeah.
I mean, you're also a media company in a sense, right? I mean, you're running a fund, but you have to do this.
Right.
That's your distribution strategy, right? Same with Masters Union. I think we're a college, but we're also a media company.
Right.
I think we have almost 18 people in our media team, just creating content. Shantanu, who runs a Bombay shaving company and lives very close by, runs a shaving company.
Right.
But also runs a podcast. And that's one of his major channels now.
Yeah, and that's a great podcast as well.
Podcast as well. So I think every company is becoming a media company. And because of that, you need folks who can create content for you. You don't need people who can run ads anymore, because guess what? Ads are not profitable. We were just discussing before, right? And not just in ad tech, but I think in any business. Because Google and Facebook have figured out how to max their CPCs. Can't make money there. So you need people who can create content. And so the first thing is, once you have your own brand, you have your own content that you've created, that's like a better CV that you can present to a recruiter in the future. Right, than any paper CV you possibly can have, right? That's number one. Number two, when you speak in front of camera, your confidence automatically builds and develops and consolidates, right? So once students have posted 5 to 6 videos of their own, either it's a podcast or a talking head or whatever, we see a deep change in the confidence they project. Of course, it helps with language, etc., those skills as well. And the final thing is that tomorrow students have to build a business. They have an existing distribution channel.
Right.
Even if it's 10,000 followers, that's okay. Right, you can post to those 10,000 followers, hey, I have this idea, would you want to do a test round with me? And at least you'll have this community that you can tap into whenever you want.
Right.
That's a big asset. Your community becomes your currency.
Right. Just to double click on this point, I got into creating content and I really love it, right? Yeah. But one of the things that I often think about is that how do you basically create an audience without being consumed by the audience? Right? Because a lot of the time, the younger generation now is doing it just for followers or just for engagement or just for that, right? And you get detached from what the real world is, right? And but you want the engagement. So is there something that you guys teach even from at that psychological level that, hey, you have to build an audience, but you don't have to let that audience consume you, because that's the next stage of social media, right? Or for mental health.
We don't. I mean, none of our students have hit like 100K yet, right? So I think maybe that problem will start once they scale further. But it's a great point. I mean, I think we should put that at least in the beginning. We should tell them and sensitize them that this is a possibility. You should be careful.
Yeah, because I think if you're aware of it, right, you're actually going to be able to grow out of it and know, like, hey, compartmentalize that. Hey, this is for work. This is for this thing. Yeah. Not let your personality get kind of.
I think students are very strategic about. So, for example, a lot of students who are building content around product management, because eventually they want a job in product management, or they want to become good product managers, or they want to meet good product managers. So having a product management podcast allows them to do that. Right. So I think students are quite strategic about why they're doing this, right? And making content is not for the sake of making content, but for the sake of perhaps better goals in the future, right? A better job or a better company that they can start, or a distribution channel. But still, I think some people can go astray. I can only think of one student actually who's on the borderline. I need to intervene there.
Right. Because the last part of this conversation, I know we're running short on time, is basically the edtech space in India, right? And of course, we've seen the ups and downs in a very compressed timeline, right? 2020, there's nothing better than edtech than since sliced bread, right? And after that, it all came crashing down. Your thoughts, edtech in India? Is there a upswing still pending, or is it just a temporary market correction?
See, I don't know K-12, so I will stay astray of commenting on K-12, but I'll talk about higher education. The entire higher education market in India is $120 billion. Quite large.
Yeah.
It's almost 2-3% of the Indian economy.
Yeah.
If you think about it. The entire higher education edtech market is probably not more than $1 billion, $1.5 billion. That's 1% of the education market. So I think we talk a lot about edtech because of the fundraising, etc., that keeps happening in edtech. Right? So in popular media, we read more about edtech, but edtech is 1% of the education market in higher education, right? So I think if you're talking about trends, we should talk about trends in higher education and not necessarily edtech. Right. It's too small. There's some great companies like, you have Upgrad and Great Learning and Simply Learn. These are amazing companies and they're targeting higher ed from a very different angle. And that market is going to grow for sure. It'll grow from 1% of the market to 2%, maybe 2% to 3%. But still that 97% market is still the norm of higher ed. The colleges, the universities, the polytechnics, the medical colleges that we go to. So that's point number one, right? So I have not started an edtech company myself, so I don't know where edtech is going and how that's going. I'm sure it's going to grow. I mean, I'm sure everybody agrees with that. I think too exciting. The other thing I would say is that right now, only 28% of Indians who finish high school go to college.
Right.
28%. That means 72 out of 100 people who are graduating class 12 are not going to college. I think we have a lot of work to do there.
Yeah.
If that 28 is taken up to 30, 35, 40, 45, that increases the Indian GDP by that much. True. By those many percentage points, right? So I think there are some way more important conversations we should have rather than reflect or sort of project where the edtech economy is going. It's very small.
Right. It makes a lot of sense actually, because what you kind of pinpointed upon was one of the big structural deficits of the country, right? Which is skilling. And skilling has a lot to do with the kind of education. Yeah. If 72% of those people only go to college, right? There's the number, I think, between class 10 and 12, that drop-off is like 50%.
So
that is in the other side, right? Yeah. So if you just start correcting throughout, there's a lot of opportunity. But I'll just touch upon this point, right? EdTech is on one side, you are absolutely right. And even if you look at the larger institutions which govern, education in the country, they are the ones who are actually driving the majority of the $120 billion market. Even if you think of a large company like Byju's, they're in soup right now, but I believe they're going to survive precisely because they still have Akash education, right? Akash is completely offline. My final question on this point is that, do you see a heavy transition from offline to online? Or do you think that it's mostly going to remain hybrid? And what portion?
The growth numbers in offline education are upwards of 15-20% year on year. And the growth in edtech is not that large. I don't know what the exact number is, but it cannot be as large as 20%. I would venture that, right? And even if it is, a lot of it is driven by inorganic growth and not organic market growing by itself. Okay, right? a lot of the higher ed education, which is coming from edtech, is actually not for college goers. It's for adult students. Right? These are people who want to do their MBA at 30, 35, 40, want to do these certificate programs, these boot camps much later in life. The traditional college, what you do after class 12, that is not served by the edtech market almost at all. Right? It's still served by distance education programs of IGNOU and DU and Mumbai University and Annamalai University and LPU and Amity.
Right.
And that's where the market is.
Yeah.
That is where we need to play. That is where the growth is. But there is no movement of undergrad students from offline to online at all.
Right.
Like at all.
Right. Do you think that that's also because there's that inherent understanding that your college experience has to be an experience with people, right?
Yes.
And to a certain extent, you find a lot of the Gen Zs and this thing who are so grown up in the age of computers and laptops.
It's
right?
not even that philosophical. Just look at the price. If I want to do a BCom today online from a good college, it would cost me 35,000 a year. From a good college, I'm saying, right? And not one of those distance education programs. If I would do it offline in the DAV college next door, it probably cost me less than that. So if offline is costing me less than online, why would I do online?
Correct.
In the US, people do online because offline is very expensive.
Correct.
But in India, offline is not expensive. So that's why there is no movement from offline to online for undergrad education. MBA is different. For undergrad, your BCom, BBA, BTech, BSc, BA, MBBS, that is going to stay offline. I don't see any change happening at least in the next 5-10 years. Not possible.
No, I think
Offline is so cheap.
that's an excellent point, right? I'm going to move on just to the last part, the quick pop quiz. Okay. Just very simple this thing. First word that comes to mind when I say the word money.
Education.
Daily.
Yeah. I think that's what happened. You can't.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. First word that comes to mind when I say personal brand.
YouTube.
First word that comes to mind when I say entrepreneurship.
Hustle.
Family business.
Legacy.
MBA.
Don't do it.
Other than at Masters Union.
No, I would, let's double click on that. It's very interesting.
I'm saving you from yourself, man.
No. I truly believe it. And I tell my team as well that, this construct that after class 12, there has to be an undergrad program, and then there has to be a postgrad program, and then there has to be an MPhil program, and then there has to be a PhD program. It's just a way for the education industry to make more money.
Right.
Why can't I teach you whatever I was teaching you in MBA at the undergrad level? In fact, many professors teach exactly the same thing.
Same thing, yeah.
How different is accounting at BCom and MBAs? It's the same, right? So this is basically to get repeat customers. So I really see a future where there is no difference between undergrad and postgrad at least. It should be one. Why do we need a separate postgrad?
Right.
We need a separate postgrad because our undergrad wasn't good enough, or I didn't get enough results from my undergrad. That's why I want to do a postgrad to get a second chance at college. Yeh sab reasons hote hain na?
Right.
I feel in the future, we will not have undergrad and postgrad as two separate things. We'll have a fused 3-4 years long college experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And
I believe that, right? And I really hope that in 5-10 years, Masters Union stops running its MBA program.
I think about this quite a bit. And I've been telling my wife this as I look, for our kids, right, I'm going to give them the option by the time they are 18 that, look, this is your money for college. If you want to go to college, go to college.
Yeah.
Or you put this into your own startup, burn it. I don't care.
Yeah.
You
Travel the world.
Travel the world. You learn as much, right? So, good point. Final part, fill in the blanks. The best Indian startup founder is?
Ronnie Screwvala.
Okay. Number 2, the book that left the biggest mark on me as an entrepreneur is?
Can I name a movie?
Yeah.
We Bought a Zoo.
Oh, I haven't watched it.
It's great.
What's it about?
It's about a father who actually, moves to a different city and buys a zoo and creates a business out of it.
Oh, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Matt Damon.
I'm gonna check it out. Dash is the best education startup in the country.
Masters Union.
Nice. I like it. Dash is the skill without which I wouldn't have been successful today.
Sales.
Final question. India will be a $1 trillion economy by 2030.
2030. Okay. So right now we're at 3.5. I would say we won't grow more than 10%. We won't grow less than 5%. So average 7.5%. Compound over. How many years left? 6 years left. 6 calendar years, 6 financial years left. So that is 4.4, 4.5 trillion.
So close to 5.
So not exactly. 5, yeah, I don't know.
I like the precision.
Yeah.
But I love this conversation, Pratham. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And hopefully we can do this even continuing into the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Kudos to what you guys are doing. And I support everything that you guys are doing. So thank you for spending
Appreciate. Thank you for asking me. Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, if you have comments, please let us know. And do like, share, and subscribe.